Hello everyone. With this lecture, I would like to cover Module 14, Vertical Transportation and Service Facilities for our course CON8413, Building Code and Construction. First and foremost, before you do anything, make sure you've printed out, or at the very least downloaded to your laptop, the course notes that pertain to this lecture. That's Module 14. Please don't just access them through Brightspace, because you never know when Brightspace may not be accessible. This way, you'll have them. So, we're going to be playing around, or learning a little bit at least, about sections 3.5, Vertical Transportation, and 3.6, Service Facilities. It's going to be super quick, and hopefully it won't take too much of your time. For the purposes of vertical transportation, we're really talking about what could be considered vertical tunnels through a building. So a perfect example of that is an elevator hoistway or an elevator shaft. It basically cuts through a number of floor structures that is, and it's basically punching holes through a floor. If these floors need to be fire rated, then it makes sense that the elevator hoistway needs to be fire rated as well to preserve the fire integrity of the whole building. Luckily for us, the way to figure out the fire resistance rating of an elevator hoistway is very simple. It's in fact very similar to the way to figure out the fire protection rating of closures for the building code. Specifically, you would refer to Table 3.5.3.1 as illustrated here and in your course notes. And if you can find the fire rating of the floor assembly, you can then find the corresponding one for the hoistway, the elevator hoistway. For example, if your floor is 2 hours, then the fire rating of the elevator hoistway must be 1.5 hours. If your floor is 1 hour, then for the elevator hoistway it's 1 hour, and so on. Also, under section 3.5, the elevator machine room also must be fire rated properly, right? It's important that the machinery that's housing the elevator equipment is also fire rated and separated from the rest of the building. And you can find that under 3.5.3.3, 1 and 2. Moving on to section 3.6, Service Facilities. So this deals with those kind of rooms and spaces, very specific rooms and spaces in a building that need to be fire rated and possibly separated from the rest of a building for a number of reasons. They include electrical rooms, mechanical rooms, telephone rooms, vertical mechanical shafts, garbage chutes, garbage rooms, and so on. So these are rooms, they may not necessarily basically their use is different from the rest of the building, okay? So they need to be properly assembled. They are covered in 3.6.2.1 from 1 to 11. As illustrated here, I would expect you to go over and read these items. One thing that I want to point out is that in the building code, the words electrical room actually mean something different from electrical equipment vault. So see if you can see what that difference is. Very well. Something very similar to what we just covered. If you have a mechanical shaft that's punching through a number of floor systems in a building, well, just like for an elevator hoistway, it must be fire rated properly to maintain the fire assembly requirements of the floor system. For this, you would go to Table 3.6.3.1, and if you can find the fire rating of the floor assembly, then you'll be able to determine the fire rating of the mechanical shaft. For example, if it's 2 hours for the floor, it's 1 hour for the mechanical shaft, 1 hour for the floor, 45 minutes for the mechanical shaft, and so on. The mechanical shaft, the vertical mechanical shaft, basically is a transportation superhighway that moves air throughout a building, and that's both air that's being brought in inside a building and shared within a whole bunch of its rooms, or taken out of the building, taken out of these rooms and expelled outdoors. So typically these need to be continuous and properly built Well, for one thing, to prevent fire using these spaces to easily travel through the rest of the building. So I've included for you an example of a detail of how a mechanical shaft would be enclosed for fire purposes. More details about this are linked in your notes. Similarly, garbage chutes. If you have lived or currently live in a multi-story apartment building, you're likely familiar with garbage chutes, right? And they're basically a vertical transportation mode for stuff that you don't want, for refuse, right? And if you ever tried one, you know how sometimes some of the stuff that you put down the chute actually gets stuck. So it makes sense that if there's ever a fire in there, that garbage chute and the garbage room be properly fire rated to prevent fire from the chute to spreading to the rest of the building. Okay, so here's an example of a detail of how the fire rating is set up for a chute in a garbage room, and this is also reproduced for you in your course notes in a bit more detail. That's it. I want to remind you that the homework for modules 13 and 14 is visible now. That's worksheet 9 and the solution. I also want to wish you good luck for our test 2. I know you're going to rock it. It's going to take a fair bit of work on your part, but you can do it. Lastly, and this was actually the first and foremost, be sure you print out or download at the very least your course notes for this, module 14. You don't just want to access them through Brightspace. You never know when all of your course notes will not be available. Okay? That's it. Thank you so much for your time.